For all that celebrations are magnificent, at the heart of the pageantry is a simple message: service.
The request reached Prince William behind closed doors, carried by a trembling senior aide, and marked for his eyes alone. Queen Camilla wanted one thing: the immediate sealing of newly surfaced royal files before anyone outside the palace could examine them. William read her written appeal twice, placed it flat upon the table, and delivered an answer so cold and final that the room seemed to lose its air. He rejected her request completely. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The prince did not raise his voice. Spread before him were private letters, handwritten meeting notes, financial approvals, and recorded conversations from the final years of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. The royal household, the offices and staff supporting the sovereign and senior royals, had guarded those records because they touched power, access, and succession. Several pages showed that plans affecting Catherine, George, Charlotte, Louis, and William's future authority had been discussed without his knowledge. Betrayal hardened into resolve as he understood why the request had arrived with such urgency. Camilla waited in a sitting room, gripping a sealed envelope until its edge bent beneath her fingers. She expected negotiation, but not rejection. When the aide entered and quietly said, "His Royal Highness will not reconsider," the Queen Consort stared at him, as though the words had struck her. Her fear mattered, because decades of rebuilt acceptance could collapse if the documents suggested that her office had influenced decisions behind the heir's back. Yet her silence revealed something else. She already knew which page William was most likely to question. The future king turned back to the first file and noticed annotations written in two hands. One set appeared beside the original meeting record. Another had been added later, changing the meaning of a key instruction. The discovery proved someone had amended sensitive material after the discussions ended. Worse, repeated references pointed to an attachment no longer inside the folder. It was not a minor appendix. The surrounding notes described it as a recommendation concerning access, authority, and the future structure of the monarchy. William closed the file and ordered the complete archive secured under his direct authority. An archive is the protected collection where official records are preserved, meaning no page could now be moved without a documented trail. Then another message arrived. Camilla demanded a private meeting that same evening, with no aides present and no written record of what would be said. William had rejected the request on paper, but Camilla was not prepared to accept defeat without forcing him to hear what those files could destroy. This was never merely a dispute over documents. For William, the files touched the deepest wounds of his childhood, his loyalty to Catherine, and his determination to protect the monarchy his children would one day inherit. For Camilla, they threatened the respectability she had spent decades constructing beside King Charles. And between them stood a sovereign whose silence could no longer protect both his wife and his heir. William remained alone long after midnight, turning each page with growing disbelief. He had watched private royal choices become public disasters before, and he understood the pattern too well. Silence could delay a crisis, but it could never erase the truth beneath it. The prince believed that protecting the monarchy meant confronting danger early, especially when the future of George, Charlotte, and Louis could be shaped by decisions made in rooms they would never enter. The line of succession, the formal order deciding who inherits the crown, made every hidden discussion about his family far more than a personal insult. Catherine entered quietly and found him staring at a document he had already read twice. She saw anger in his face, but fear sat beneath it. William told her that one record described plans to restrict his access to major household decisions while Charles was undergoing medical treatment. The princess understood immediately why it mattered. If those restrictions had succeeded, the future king could have been kept outside choices affecting his own role, while others gained influence during a vulnerable period. She placed a hand beside the papers and asked whether their children's names appeared. His silence gave her the answer before his words did. Camilla had spent decades rebuilding an identity once damaged by scandal. She had stood beside the king, carried out public duties, and fought to be seen as dependable rather than divisive. Now the files threatened to tear open everything she believed had been settled. Charles received a written summary of William's refusal and sat without speaking. When the Queen Consort asked whether he would intervene, the monarch looked away. That single movement told her his loyalty was no longer automatic. The future king then found another note. Catherine's growing public influence was described as something requiring containment, a word so cold that he read it aloud in disbelief. She understood it as more than palace language. It suggested someone had viewed her trust with the public as a threat that needed to be controlled. Camilla insisted during a recorded private conversation with Charles that the documents had been misunderstood. Yet when he asked why her private secretary's initials appeared beside the most damaging passages, she refused to answer directly. Her hesitation gave William the first real sign that the truth began long before the files surfaced. To understand why those initials mattered, William would have to return to the precise royal ceremony where suspicion first became something far more dangerous. Months before the files surfaced, one carefully staged royal ceremony had quietly changed everything. The public saw polished unity, formal smiles, and disciplined tradition. Behind the palace doors, however, William discovered that Catherine's role had been reduced without consultation. Camilla's allies had rewritten the order of precedence, and a private confrontation had ended with a warning no one in the room would ever forget. William received the revised program only minutes before the Commonwealth reception began. The event at Buckingham Palace had been designed to welcome representatives from nations linked through the Commonwealth, a voluntary association of countries with historic ties to Britain and the Crown. Catherine had been approved to deliver the principal greeting, a role that would underline her growing place within the monarchy. Yet her name had suddenly been removed and replaced with a minor ceremonial duty. The prince checked the original schedule twice. His office had approved it. Charles had approved it. Someone had changed it after both decisions were settled. The future king found Camilla in a private corridor and asked who had authorized the alteration. She did not hesitate. The crown required balance, the Queen Consort replied, keeping her voice calm as his anger sharpened. William heard something colder beneath those words. Balance sounded like an excuse for weakening Catherine without admitting it openly. He pressed her again, but she refused to name the person responsible. Instead, she warned him that public popularity could never be allowed to control royal order. The message felt deliberate, and he carried it with him throughout the reception. Catherine fulfilled the smaller role without complaint. She spoke warmly, maintained her composure, and gave no sign that anything had changed. Only later, when she and William were alone, did the strain finally break through. The princess removed her ceremonial brooch, placed it carefully on the table, and told him the decision had not felt administrative. It had felt personal. The brooch marked her formal participation in the event, making the quiet gesture a refusal to pretend the humiliation meant nothing. He promised her he would discover who had signed the change. A junior courtier later provided a documented account of what happened next. The officials saw Camilla's private secretary carrying the approved program into a restricted office shortly after the confrontation. That schedule never returned to the event file. Months later, the surfaced records revealed the deeper design. The reception had been one part of an internal plan to reduce Catherine's visibility while expanding the Queen Consort's control over major appearances. William now held the handwritten instruction, linking her office directly to that strategy. The altered ceremony was no isolated slight. It was the moment a hidden campaign exposed itself. The ceremony had supplied the motive. The files had supplied the evidence. And now William was ready to place both directly in front of Camilla. No aides entered the room. No private secretaries were permitted to remain. William stood beside a table containing the disputed files, while Camilla faced him from the opposite side, her request still unopened between them. She began with an appeal to family loyalty. He answered with a page bearing her office's instructions. Then, as her defense began to collapse, William asked the question she had spent months avoiding. William made his position clear before she could control the conversation. The archive would not be sealed, altered, destroyed, or returned to her office. An archive is a protected collection of official records preserved so future decisions can be traced, and these papers now carried evidence of choices that affected the succession itself. The prince understood that hiding them would not protect the monarchy. It would place every future decision under suspicion. Camilla answered that releasing the material could destabilize Charles, shatter public confidence, and turn an internal dispute into a constitutional spectacle, a crisis involving the authority and public role of the crown. The future king slid the Commonwealth reception memo across the table. He asked why Catherine's approved welcome had been removed and why the instruction carried markings linked to Camilla's office. The queen consort refused to touch the page. She accused him of treating every adjustment as a personal attack and warned that his anger was blinding him to the pressures surrounding the king. William did not step back. He told her his wife and children would never again be used as pieces in a private struggle for palace control. Camilla's composure finally cracked. Her voice tightened as she insisted she had been protecting Charles during a period of illness, not building power for herself. The monarch's reduced schedule had created gaps in communication, she argued, and someone had needed to prevent the household from falling into confusion. William listened, then placed a second document beside the first. A handwriting comparison, recorded by the keeper of household papers, matched the order reducing Catherine's role to notes the queen consort had personally written during an earlier planning session. The silence changed everything. Camilla admitted that she knew a strategy existed to restrain the Wales household's growing influence. She said she believed it was temporary and limited to scheduling, not a wider attempt to weaken William's authority. The prince asked who expanded it. She hesitated, then warned him that the complete archive would expose decisions made by more than her office. William closed the folder and moved toward the door. Camilla stopped him with one final sentence. The name inside the missing attachment belonged to someone he had spent months trying to protect. Her warning did not weaken William's resolve, but it forced him to confront the one power capable of changing everything, the king himself. King Charles received the most sensitive file in a red folder placed beside his morning papers. He read the first page slowly, reached the handwritten instruction, and stopped. No anger crossed his face. No command followed. He simply removed his glasses, set them beside the folder, and asked whether William had already seen everything. The answer left him facing an impossible choice between his wife and the future monarch. Charles understood that he still possessed the authority to overrule his son. He could order the archive sealed under royal confidentiality, the protection used to keep sensitive sovereign records away from public or unauthorized access. Senior officials expected him to do exactly that. The king had defended Camilla through years of public anger, family resistance, and private doubt, so few believed he would abandon her now. Yet sealing these files would also mean blocking William from evidence concerning his own household, his wife, and the future he was expected to carry. The monarch turned another page and found a note describing his declining health as the reason Camilla's office needed greater control. The words struck deeper than accusation. His illness had become justification for decisions he had never approved. Charles read the passage again, slower this time, and realized that concern for him had been used as political leverage inside his own home. That mattered because authority borrowed during weakness could quietly become authority never returned. It also meant the people claiming to protect him may have been reducing his knowledge while speaking in his name. Camilla entered and closed the door behind her. She asked him to stop William before the dispute escaped the family. The queen consort reminded him of everything they had survived and warned that the documents could destroy the trust they had spent decades rebuilding. Charles did not meet her eyes. He told her he needed the truth before he could offer protection. She stepped back, visibly shaken, because his words carried something worse than anger: doubt. The king then opened a file signed by a former household official. In a documented statement, the retired courtier confirmed that Charles had never been informed about restrictions placed on William's briefings or Catherine's ceremonial access. The account also identified the missing attachment. It was a confidential recommendation proposing a permanent redistribution of royal authority if the monarch became unable to maintain a full working schedule. Charles finally understood the scale of the danger. This was not merely about one reception or one altered program. Someone had prepared for a future in which his weakness could be used to reshape the crown. The monarch refused to overrule his son and authorized William to locate the missing attachment. Within minutes, secure calls began reaching Camilla's household, and the first doors started closing. The king's refusal to rescue Camilla transformed William's decision from a family dispute into a palace reckoning that could no longer be contained. By sunrise, office doors were opening earlier than usual, private telephones were ringing, and senior courtiers were being summoned without explanation. Camilla's request had failed. Charles had refused to reverse William's decision. Now every official whose initials appeared in the files understood that the archive would be examined line by line. What began as one desperate appeal had become a test of loyalty across the entire royal household. William acted before anyone could remove another page. He suspended archive access for several members of Camilla's staff and ordered a documented chain of custody, a written record showing exactly who handled each file and when. The prince knew why that mattered. One attachment had already vanished, and without strict control, every remaining document could be questioned. He also separated planned engagements involving the Wales household and the Queen's office. Those teams normally coordinated public duties, schedules, and announcements, so dividing them sent a brutal message. Trust between the two sides had broken. Camilla entered her private office expecting resistance, but not humiliation. 2 secure filing cabinets had been sealed under William's authority. She touched one lock, held her hand there for a moment, then slowly pulled it away. The queen consort understood what the gesture meant. The files remained inside her own rooms, yet she no longer controlled who could open them. Influence she had spent years building had disappeared in a single morning, and no order from Charles had arrived to restore it. Sophie visited without a formal appointment and found her sitting alone, with no prepared remarks and no aides nearby. The trusted confidant asked whether she wanted the staff recalled. Camilla shook her head. During their private conversation, she admitted that William's rejection was not the deepest wound. Charles refusing to defend her immediately had hurt far more. Sophie listened as the queen consort confessed that she no longer knew whether the king doubted her judgment, her loyalty, or both. A retiring equerry then delivered the first break in the search. In a documented statement given to William's security team, the royal officer revealed that the missing attachment had been copied before the original disappeared. An equerry is a senior aide who assists members of the royal family with official duties and private arrangements. One copy, he said, had been placed inside a personal correspondence box at Windsor. The discovery created a new barrier. William learned that ordinary household procedure could not open the box because it contained private material belonging to Charles. Only the monarch could authorize access. The future king contacted his father directly, and after a long silence, the king agreed to accompany him to Windsor. Neither Camilla nor palace lawyers would attend. No advisors would stand between them. Charles and his son would search together. With the machinery of the palace stripped away, the crisis would now be decided by a father, a son, and the truth waiting inside one locked box. At Windsor, there were no courtiers to translate their words, and no officials to soften what the documents revealed. Charles unlocked the correspondence box himself while William stood beside him in silence. Beneath old letters and ceremonial drafts lay a thin envelope marked with the date of the Commonwealth reception. When Charles opened it, both men understood why someone had been desperate to keep its contents hidden. Charles unfolded the missing attachment and began to read. The proposal called for royal communications, major appearances, charitable appointments, and household briefings to be centralized around Camilla's office whenever his schedule became restricted. Centralized control meant placing several important decisions under one team instead of allowing separate royal households to manage their own work. That mattered because public duties shaped influence, while access to briefings shaped power. The document went further. It recommended limiting William's ability to challenge those arrangements until a formal transfer of authority became unavoidable. The king read the pages twice. On the second reading, his expression changed. He admitted that his determination to protect Camilla from criticism had allowed people around her to exercise authority he had never knowingly granted. Charles had believed he was defending his wife from another cycle of public hostility. Instead, that protection had created space for private ambition. He lowered the document and acknowledged that his silence had placed William, Catherine, and their household in a position where decisions could be made against them without a fair chance to respond. William answered without anger. The prince told his father that loyalty became dangerous when everyone else was required to ignore the truth. He did not accuse Charles of designing the scheme, but he refused to excuse the conditions that had allowed it to grow. The monarch absorbed those words without resistance. For once, he did not defend himself or shift responsibility. He simply admitted that the future king had been right to reject the request. A handwritten notation changed the meaning of the entire file. Camilla had approved temporary coordination during Charles's reduced schedule, but she had crossed out the recommendation for permanent control. The queen consort had enabled the first stage, yet she had not approved the full campaign. The attachment proved she was neither innocent nor the sole architect. Ambitious officials had expanded her defensive request into a deliberate effort to weaken the Wales household. Charles placed the paper between them and made his decision. The scheme would be dismantled, the responsible officials removed, and Camilla required to acknowledge her role. William agreed, but insisted the truth could not be softened before the palace addressed the growing storm. For the first time, father and son shared the same truth, but beyond Windsor's walls, that truth was already beginning to break into public view. At Windsor, there were no courtiers to translate their words, and no officials to soften what the documents revealed. Charles unlocked the correspondence box himself, while William stood beside him in silence. Beneath old letters and ceremonial drafts lay a thin envelope marked with the date of the Commonwealth reception. When Charles opened it, both men understood why someone had been desperate to keep its contents hidden. Charles unfolded the missing attachment and began to read. The proposal called for royal communications, major appearances, charitable appointments, and household briefings to be centralized around Camilla's office whenever his schedule became restricted. Centralized control meant placing several important decisions under one team instead of allowing separate royal households to manage their own work. That mattered because public duties shaped influence, while access to briefings shaped power. The document went further. It recommended limiting William's ability to challenge those arrangements until a formal transfer of authority became unavoidable. The king read the pages twice. On the second reading, his expression changed. He admitted that his determination to protect Camilla from criticism had allowed people around her to exercise authority he had never knowingly granted. Charles had believed he was defending his wife from another cycle of public hostility. Instead, that protection had created space for private ambition. He lowered the document and acknowledged that his silence had placed William, Catherine, and their household in a position where decisions could be made against them without a fair chance to respond. William answered without anger. The prince told his father that loyalty became dangerous when everyone else was required to ignore the truth. He did not accuse Charles of designing the scheme, but he refused to excuse the conditions that had allowed it to grow. The monarch absorbed those words without resistance. For once, he did not defend himself or shift responsibility. He simply admitted that the future king had been right to reject the request. A handwritten notation changed the meaning of the entire file. Camilla had approved temporary coordination during Charles's reduced schedule, but she had crossed out the recommendation for permanent control. The queen consort had enabled the first stage, yet she had not approved the full campaign. The attachment proved she was neither innocent nor the sole architect. Ambitious officials had expanded her defensive request into a deliberate effort to weaken the Wales household. Charles placed the paper between them and made his decision. The scheme would be dismantled, the responsible officials removed, and Camilla required to acknowledge her role. William agreed, but insisted the truth could not be softened before the palace addressed the growing storm. For the first time, father and son shared the same truth, but beyond Windsor's walls, that truth was already beginning to break into public view. The story escaped the palace before an official statement could contain it. By morning, Britain awoke to a front page dominated by two faces: William looking immovable, Camilla appearing isolated beneath the words, "He said no." Broadcasters abandoned planned coverage, crowds gathered near Buckingham Palace, and a private conflict over hidden royal files became a national argument about trust, loyalty, and the future of the crown. William read the palace statement before it was released, and noticed what it did not deny. Historic household records were undergoing an internal review, but officials refused to challenge the central claim that he had rejected Camilla's request to seal them. An internal review is a formal examination carried out within an institution to establish what happened and who was responsible. The careful wording mattered, because any direct denial could later be exposed as false, while silence allowed the public to draw its own conclusions. Within minutes, commentators divided into two camps. Some praised the prince for refusing concealment. Others warned that exposing private conflict could permanently weaken confidence in the monarchy. Catherine watched the first television bulletin beside William. She remained quiet until the broadcaster called the dispute the most serious rupture between their households in years. Then the princess reached for his hand. The future king did not look away from the screen, but he tightened his grip around hers. Both understood what was now at stake. Their children could inherit a monarchy strengthened by honesty, or one damaged by the belief that power had been protected through secrecy. Camilla watched the same coverage alone. She endured the headlines until commentators returned to the Commonwealth reception and described it as the moment the hidden struggle first became visible. The Queen Consort turned off the television before the segment ended. Her silence carried shame, anger, and the painful knowledge that a ceremony once presented as unity had become evidence against her. Outside Buckingham Palace, public feeling took shape beneath the balcony. A crowd gathered as cameras arrived, and one woman lifted a handwritten sign, reading, "The Crown must not fear the truth." The message spread across broadcasts because it reduced the entire crisis to one brutal demand. Then a national presenter revealed through a documented newsroom briefing that several senior household officials had resigned. The departures confirmed that Charles and William had already begun dismantling the structure built around Camilla's office. The palace moved quickly. A final announcement stated that Charles, William, and Camilla had reached a settlement. Authority would be reassigned, responsibility acknowledged, and the fate of the files decided without further delay. Public judgment had delivered its demand for honesty, but the final verdict still had to be spoken inside the family that created the crisis. The final meeting did not end with shouting. It ended with 3 signatures. Charles accepted responsibility for allowing private loyalty to blur royal accountability. Camilla surrendered the expanded household authority that had grown around her office. William agreed that the files would remain protected from sensational exploitation, but preserved from destruction. In that restrained decision, the monarchy chose truth over concealment, and a future king established the boundary he would never permit anyone to cross again. Charles placed strategic royal planning under a joint structure that would remain under his leadership while he reigned. But William would now receive full access to every decision affecting the succession, the Wales household, and constitutional continuity. Constitutional continuity meant keeping the monarchy's authority and responsibilities stable when illness, absence, or succession changed who carried the burden. The settlement mattered because no office could again use uncertainty around the king's health to isolate his heir. It also ensured that decisions involving Catherine and their children could never be made behind the prince's back. Camilla signed next. She admitted during the recorded final meeting that fear had driven her desperate request. The Queen Consort believed sealing the documents would shield Charles from humiliation and protect the stability they had fought to build. Yet she now accepted that concealment would also have hidden her own errors. Her admission did not erase the damage, but it ended the denial that had allowed the crisis to deepen. William chose restraint over revenge. He told her that forgiveness could not mean pretending the events had never occurred. The future king would not publicly humiliate Camilla, but neither would he restore the influence lost through secrecy. His decision drew a permanent boundary. Compassion could remain, but unchecked power could not. Charles removed the officials who had turned temporary coordination into an attempt to sideline William and Catherine. The monarch then issued a formal statement reaffirming confidence in the Prince and Princess of Wales, making clear that their authority within the monarchy's future was secure. The explosive files were placed in the royal archives, the official collection preserving important crown records, with an unalterable inventory preventing any household from removing or rewriting them. The king carried the recovered attachment into the archive himself. William watched as his father placed it inside and closed the box. That final act was not surrender, it was accountability. William's rejection had not destroyed Camilla, overthrown Charles, or broken the crown beyond repair. It forced them to accept that the monarchy could survive embarrassment, conflict, and confession, but never a future built upon concealed power. And so the desperate request ended not with the files disappearing, but with the royal family finally accepting that loyalty without truth was never loyalty at all. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.